If I told you that today's podcast is going to be about a guy that built his business from the back of a car, what would you say? What about if I told you that that same guy has turned that business into a business that turns over $40 million a year, employs over 380 staff, and they build 3,000 homes right across the United States? This is the story of Stephen Scoggins. It's an amazing story. This guy's been through it all. It's incredible. It's a full rags to riches story here, and it's one of the best from A to B's that I can recall doing. So I hope you guys enjoy this. It's very inspirational. I know you'll get a lot out of it. All of the links and everything towards Stephen, his books and the websites, etc., are going to be in the show notes. So make sure you head across there and check it out. The SiteShed podcast is made possible because of Tradie Web Guys, creators of beautiful websites designed specifically for tradies and contractors. If you're tired of dealing with web designers that have no idea about your industry, then head across to tradiewebguys.com.au and reach out. Like many companies from all over the place, you'll be very glad you did.
Giving tradies and contractors around the globe the tools to run a modern business. You're listening to Toolbox Talks from the SiteShed. Now here's your host, Matt Jones.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to Toolbox Talks on the SiteShed podcast. You are joining me, your host, Matt Jones, today for an exciting episode of From A to B with Mr. Stephen Scoggins out of the USA. Hello, Stephen.
How you doing, my friend? Oh my gosh, Australia. Tell you what, man, I love it.
Actually, we're venturing over to your shores at the end of the month. We're speaking at Service World Expo in Las Vegas. So,
oh, look at you. You're going to have a good time and a busy time, I bet.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually kind of looking forward to going to Vegas for a work function because the last time I went there, it wasn't for a work function. And as a result, I don't remember any of it. So,
got to be careful in Vegas.
Yeah, no kidding. I found that out the hard way, as I think most people do.
Right.
So where are you located?
You know, it's I'm one of the few. I'm actually born and raised in a small town or small city, which became a larger city, Raleigh, North Carolina.
Oh, okay.
So, hailing from good old Raleigh, North Kakalaki, as we like to call it in the South.
So you're no doubt a football nut?
You know what? It's really strange. I never got into football, but I did get into ice hockey. I don't know how that happened because we didn't have ice hockey here until 1994.
Wow.
Of all things.
Yeah.
But I'm a bit of a hockey nut. I like that. I guess it's because it's football on ice. If that makes any sense.
Who's your team?
You know, it's going to be the Carolina Hurricanes, probably, obviously, number one. But they haven't done so well the last few years, as you can imagine. So
yeah, my wife's from Winnipeg, so I'm on the Jets bandwagon.
Nice.
Yeah, I love hockey.
They have cool. I have to admit, they have cool jerseys. I mean, you know,
they do. So. They do. Yeah, we're back there at the end of the month, so I'll be grabbing myself some merch.
Nice.
Anyway, thank you for joining us on the show today. We got introduced through 6 Degrees of Separation, I suppose, and I'm really interested in hearing your story. You've sort of come from a trade background originally, and you've come on in leaps and bounds to, I suppose, achieve success in various different verticals and industries. One of the big myths we like to dispel here at the SiteShed podcast is, you know, where you begin is not always where you end up. And you know, we like to get people like yourselves on the show to tell a little bit about your story. And for any people that are out there that are listening, maybe young people, you know, if they are thinking about getting into a trade, it doesn't always mean you have to be digging holes when you're 60 years old. You know, that can open a lot of doors, a lot of windows of opportunity in various areas. So, mate, thank you again for joining us. Really looking forward to jumping into this. So, tell me, what did you want to be when you were a kid?
You know, what I wanted to be when I was a kid, I believe, was probably something along the lines of some kind of creative arts person, as strange as that sounds.
Okay.
Not in like the dancing and the theater, but more in the artistic realm of painting and drawing and sketching and that kind of thing.
Okay. Is that a bit of a hobby of yours?
Yeah. You know, it was for a time. I haven't had time to do it in quite some time. Owning and operating two successful companies can take up a lot of your time.
Yeah.
And what little bit of free time I have goes to my family. They've been very encouraging and very supportive all these years, and I owe it to them to invest in them as much as they've invested in me.
Oh, fantastic. And tell me a little bit about the family.
Beautiful wife, Karen. She's actually with our son right now doing band camp.
Whoa.
So I heard that one time at band camp is a running theme at our house. So my son is literally at band camp right now. So now, granted, she's there, so that's probably a good thing. I don't think we're going to see any kind of American Pie stories from his band camp, which is good.
Good. No flutes.
Anyway. No flutes. He plays the trombone. Thank God.
Oh, there you go. Oh, good to hear.
Yeah, but 2 boys, 15 and 16. They're awesome kids. They've been great. So yeah, just a happy family life.
Oh, good man. Good man. 2 boys, Batman and Robin. Great.
That's right. Trouble 1 and trouble 2.
Yeah, no kidding. Now, I know in my intro to you, I was given a little bit of an oversight as to your story which led to you discovering your first company, Custom Homes Exterior. Could you give the listeners a bit of a overview as to where you were when that happened, and I suppose your situation and maybe the type of car you were sleeping in?
Yeah, right. Well, it was a borrowed car. It wasn't even my car. It was a white 1987 Corsica, of all things. I still remember the sunroof leaking off the top of my forehead, so I remember it vividly. But it's funny. Life can be tricky, or it can be rewarding, and it really comes down to your perception of what you want to accomplish, what you see yourself accomplishing. Are you willing to pay the price in order to get past your sacrifice and onto the opportunity that lays before you? And life for me was very much that way. For those out there that are kind of from a biblical worldview, my life kind of reads like Joseph. And for those of you who are not don't describe to that, it reads a little more like Forrest Gump.
You kind of sound a bit like Forrest Gump, actually.
Both men had their right. Gen A. That's my Gen A. So. Yeah, my life has been full of ups and downs. I was born and raised in a broken home. My father and mother, unfortunately, had spent a lot of time chasing their own demons. My dad spent many years, upwards of 30 years, as an alcoholic, and suffered from alcoholism. My mother seemed to struggle from some kind of emotional distress or some kind of mental distress on a regular basis, victim mindset and things of that nature. And so early on, both of my parents kind of disappeared. My mother, unfortunately, tried to take her own life when I was a kid. I found her and was able to get her to the hospital at the tender age of 9 years old, of all things.
Wow.
And I don't remember seeing her very much after that for 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
Thank God she's healthy and doing well now. But, that was a fairly traumatic time.
Yeah.
My father, was, like I said, he was in Denver, Colorado somewhere chasing his own thing. So my grandmother kind of raised me there for a little while, from probably the age of probably 6, 9, or 10, something like about that time frame.
Mm-hmm.
She developed brain cancer. Cancer that started in her lungs and transpired to her brain. Basically, those little skinny little cigarette things. I have a feeling they had a part to do with it.
Yeah.
So that kind of set the tone. You grow up around at least one person who's loving and affirming and caring and considerate, and then all of a sudden that can be taken away from you in a moment's notice, and the next thing you know, life is topsy-turvy.
Yeah.
So I spent the next, really from the time that I was 11 on up to the time I was 17, working every weekend, every holiday, and every free time off in construction.
Okay.
My father, I'm now a 4th generation general contractor, if you will. My father was a framer. He used to frame up houses and commercial buildings. And his father before him was a general contracting framer. And his father before him was actually a certified laborer, if you will, craftsman. And, so I learned early on how to use my hands. And then through divine intervention, if you will, I had a guy by the name of Steve Myrick, who was my father's employer, who was the actual general contractor that built houses here in Raleigh. For whatever reason, he took a liking to me, and I still don't know why to this day. I asked when my first book came out. I actually interviewed, or had his wife interviewed, and she basically told me she told the interviewer that the reason he felt like he helped me was because he saw in me his former self.
Yeah, right.
And I'll never forget this because he spent a lot of time. I remember being 16, being on a framing crew. It's like 90 some degrees outside, 100% humidity, a really warm day. And of course, back in the day, that was cut off jeans, shorts, and no T-shirt and a tool belt. It was kind of the construction.
Like the village people.
That's right. No hard hat though. So, working out in the hot sun. And so every time he would come by, he always drove this white Jeep Grand Cherokee with a gray bottom with a big dent in the left-hand bumper. His homeboy was always backing into stuff, like all the time. And he wore a neck brace to prove it. But every time he'd pop over, he'd roll the window down and to come talk to you. And the next thing you know, you had this big blast of cool air-conditioned air hit you in the face.
Right.
So Now, obviously, you want to sit down and talk to the guy.
Yeah, in his car.
And for whatever reason, yeah, right, exactly. Well, that's the funny thing is he would say, "Come ride with me for a minute." That's all he really did every day was drive around the neighborhood over and over and over again. It's kind of like a NASCAR, but slower.
Yeah.
And so, he spent all this time. And I'll never forget this because he asked me one question because I think he knew my upbringing, at least my upbringing at that time. And I think he could sense that I was heading down the same path because my dad's idea of success when I was that age was trying to impart to me on a regular basis that, if I work really hard, maybe I could earn $12 or $14 an hour. Or some other kind of moderate wage, and then have a supervisor for the rest of my life and a boss of sorts, and I could go out in the sun, work my hiney off, come home, be very proud of a good day's work.
Yeah.
And I was just like, for some reason, I just felt like I was more than okay with doing the hard work, but I also felt like it should lead to somewhere.
Do you think, Stephen, it's a lot to do with a generational thing, that mentality?
It's becoming more difficult to let the younger generation understand the power of sowing a seed of hard work. Steve Meyer once told me that he said, "Well, Stephen, you need to, first of all, never despise a small beginning." He said, "Because inside of every oak tree and every oak tree is an acorn."
Yeah.
To make sure you understood that. And then he asked me a question that literally changed my life. He said, "What's the difference between a rich man and a poor man?" And for the life of me, my first answer that came to my head, I was like, "Well, duh, money." And he just kind of laughed and giggled. He said, "Absolutely not." I'm like, "Huh? What are you talking about?" He said, "The difference between a rich man and a poor man is simply the way they think. A rich man sacrifices to earn. A poor man sacrifices to spend. If you'll spend your life learning to earn, learning to invest, learning to sow, then you'll spend the rest of your life reaping."
Yep.
And it changed something in me. Now, I was probably maybe 14 or 15 years old, and my father had just gotten evicted out of his house, or we all got evicted out of our house. We spent some time with grandparents and so on and so forth, and then I go to high school. And in my junior year in high school, the construction industry obviously took a tumble in the early or mid 90s. And the next thing I know, I'm working to pay our family's bills, just to help my dad keep up and pay the light bill, keep my brother fed. So high school wasn't fun for me. We later found out that I had dyslexia.
Okay.
Absolutely. And a few months later, I had dropped out of high school to kind of continue that on. I felt like it was important to take care of my little brother specifically at the time. And my father, who was trying, it wasn't like he wasn't trying, but he was never really good with his money. And again, those seeds that Steve Meyer had sown in me began to take a little bit of root. Lo and behold, Steve Meyer puts me in business by myself for the first time at the tender age of 18. He hands me a siding company, buys me the equipment to install siding. And then for the next year, I did really well.
What's siding?
18, 19, 18. Here we have James Hardy. We do a lot of James Hardy and also vinyl siding. So it's the cladding that you put on the exterior of the house to kind of dress it up and make it look pretty.
Okay.
But, so he kind of put me in business for myself. And like any typical 18-year-old that's never handled money before, I blew it.
Yeah.
I was given all the money, got involved with probably a girl or two I probably shouldn't have. And the next thing I know, I'm in $70,000, $80,000 in debt.
Whew.
And entirely depressed.
Yeah.
Clinically depressed even. And I believe it or not, I actually walked away from what at that time was close to a 6-figure salary at 19 years old.
Wow.
I spent the next year losing every single thing, partially due to the frustration and the pain I was receiving from the depression. The other part was from pride and arrogance and some of the humility that left my body that should have been there. Let's put it that way. So I spent a lot of time doing that and soul searching, all the way to the point where I thought I was going to join the military, and almost took my life over top of a bridge here at 440 and Capitol Boulevard. So life began to be very, very tough. Divine intervention kind of stepped into play. And the next thing you know, I surrender myself to what I believe to be a God himself. In my spirit, I heard, if you'll basically knock off this craziness, I'll bless you. And I committed to it. And 3 weeks later, I started custom home exteriors while sleeping in a car. It's currently in 3 states and employs about 400 people and is about a $40 million business as of today.
Wow.
Now, next December, we will celebrate all 20 years in business.
Wow. That's amazing.
So I started it when I was 20.
And so custom homes exterior that you guys do, is it the same sort of thing? Is it like cladding?
Yeah, it's all cladding. It's we do about 3,000 homes a year collectively.
Wow.
Which is considerable amount for really anybody in the economy. We install more James Hardy Color Plus siding than anybody else in the country.
Wow.
As a collective effort, and we're pretty, we're well respected in the marketplace because people respect hard work.
Yep.
Even as much as recently, I was out on a job site and pulled my tool belt out just to help out on something.
Yep.
And your installers, your team members, they seem to appreciate those who don't live on a pedestal or a cloud.
Yep.
So it's important to kind of understand those parts of the philosophy. And, that's kind of the quick run story. It's been 20 years of sacrifices and ups and downs and getting past, the first hurdle you get past is making payroll on a regular basis and learning to save and contribute. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts.
So let's talk a little bit about that transition into CHE. What was the pivotal moment there? Like, when was it that you just said, okay, you know what? I've really got to give this a decent crack. I mean, you said you had that like epiphany that came in a dream or whatever it was. Was that it? I mean, was that the penny drop moment for you?
You know what? I think honestly, the penny drop moment for me would have been, some people start their business to make money.
Yeah.
I started my business to eat.
Right.
I didn't have a stable shelter. I didn't have a stable income. I didn't have a stable, even really sustaining source of all my wealth, everything I needed, food and shelter and everything. So, for me, the first crack was to do that. The second thing was to prove to myself that the trouble I got myself into, I was willing to outwork it to get myself out of it. A lot of folks will get themselves in a really bad financial direction and refuse to sacrifice to really get themselves out of it. I went back and paid off all that debt within about 4 years of starting my company. Because of my poor credit and because of all the things, I was unable to borrow money. So I'm a big believer in starting business with no debt.
Right.
Because I did it. It's harder, but it's a lot more rewarding, because when the housing crashed here in the US in 2007, 6, and 5, what happened to CHE was we were out of debt, so we cleaned up the market.
Right.
All my competitors went out of business. They were all buying boats and RVs and all this kind of stuff in 2004 and 5. And the next thing you know, they're not even here anymore.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a strong lesson.
Yeah. It was a very good one for me, for sure. That's when I got started.
I want to ask you a few questions, I suppose, about the business from where it was to where it is now. I mean, obviously, going from a business that was effectively turning over nothing to a business that turns over 40 million a year, you're doing 3,000 homes a year. How many staff did you say?
We have about 380 team members company-wide. That includes installers as well as our office and admin staff.
Okay. So let's start, I suppose, with the work. Like, where did the work come from and how did it get from where it was then to where it is now? I mean, that's a big scale.
Yeah, it's funny. I forgot who said it, but there's a book called Raving Fan.
Yeah.
It has Raving Fan in the title. And when I was working with people, it was never about, for me, it was not even as much about the money as it was proving that I could be the best.
Yeah.
I could outserve anyone who came in contact with me and outwork anyone who came in contact with me. And for whatever reason, that tends to inspire people around you, and including your customer base.
Mm-hmm.
Your customer base learns to respect those that give them more, in the sense that they treat them like they matter. It's very easy when you get a large size company to begin to treat customers like their numbers or like their units or metrics. And, and CHE has always been built on relationships. So it was funny. I didn't have to market a lot at all. I just began to really focus on the person I had in front of me. How well could I serve them? And I felt like if I served them well, then I would be rewarded with this green paper that has presidents on it. It was really cool.
And when you're saying you focused on relationships, the people in front of you, could that be both sides of the fence, employees as well as customers?
Absolutely. In fact, here's the most important thing I'll probably say the entire time we have a chat.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest failure that I've ever had. My biggest failure was building a business without building myself.
Okay.
I learned the hard way that personal development is personal.
Yeah.
I also learned that you can do a lot of damage because when you bring all of your baggage to your day-to-day operation, you bring it to your business. You can have incredible team members and alienate all of them if you yourself are not ready to manage them or steward them or serve them in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. So I suppose with that in mind, going from, a business that was yourself to now a business that has, 380 plus employees across the board, how do you manage that sort of scale? How do you manage and facilitate effectively, that kind of growth?
The principle I think actually comes from don't put out a fire, figure out how the fire started and then create a process around it.
Beautiful.
So it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time just putting out fires, especially in the trade industry, construction industry as a whole. It doesn't matter if you're HVAC, your plumbing, your water, your sewer, no matter what it is. Most tradespeople do not think strategically.
Yeah.
They think incredibly tactically.
Yeah.
This is how I do my deal.
Yeah.
And because of that, they can actually suffer from an entrepreneur seizure where they think everything is about just getting the job done on time and things of that nature, rather than strategizing, what am I going to need a year from now, 5 years from now, processes, people, branding, equipment, computer sources, things of that nature. And if anything I've learned is the experience in the marketplace has taught me that it's just as important to think strategically as it is to think tactically.
So when you say strategically, and I mean, you touched on it with, procedures and things, was that something that how did you learn that? Because obviously you wouldn't have had experience in that. Who taught you, the advantages of creating systems and processes and that kind of thing?
I think awareness taught it to me.
Okay.
When I would get around my customer base, I would spend a lot of time and I would see that their businesses ran, at least from my side, from my viewpoint, very seamless. Everybody had a role, a responsibility, and a metric and some kind of way to consistently measure what they were doing. And then as I looked around me, so for example, purchase orders, material purchase orders.
Yeah.
My customer base uses purchase orders to pay me.
Yeah.
However, there was a time when I didn't use purchase orders at all. I just wrote a check based on how much I thought something was going to be or someone requested.
Yeah.
And I very quickly began to learn that controlling your costs is just as important as actually making a profit.
Mm-hmm.
Your cost, if they get out of whack on any particular project, can actually erase all your profit and then some.
Yeah.
So by actually getting as detailed and as fixated on your overall costs, you're able to really drill down and then actually tack on your kind of margin and things of that nature to it. I think early on when I started the business, obviously when I was sleeping in a car, the last thing on my mind was strategic thinking. However, within about 2 years, I began to develop the need for additional help and tools and services. And I just looked at my customer base and I said, what's working for them?
Right.
I looked at my competitors and I said, what's working for them? And then I looked at myself and I said, what's the difference between them and myself?
Mm-hmm.
What do I bring to the market that nobody else does?
And what was that?
For me, I think it was sincere care. I think sincere care and servitude or servanthood is probably the most underutilized tool that any business will ever have.
And so what's the difference there, Stephen, in saying that when you go to, pretty much any service company's website on the entire planet and they say, our specialty is customer service?
It'll show itself in action.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is, I'll give you an example. Not too terribly long ago, 5-6 years ago, we had a massive tornado come through North Carolina that rocked a bunch of houses.
Mm-hmm.
In the time, I had a remodeling arm of CHE as well. And that remodeling arm replaced roofs and walls and windows and pretty much anything. Well, at about 10 o'clock at night, while we still had rolling storms coming through off and on, the entire time I'm trying to put this neighborhood back together, I get a call at 10 o'clock at night from my homeowner, and they're crying hysterical. And they said, oh my gosh, our house is leaking. There's water everywhere. I mean, it's like pouring in, and we're going to have, and this is the baby's room, and things of that nature. So someone who really is committed to service, really is committed to making sure that their buyer has the best experience possible, will do something about it. I didn't say, look, I'll check on it first thing in the morning. I didn't say, hey, look, I'll send somebody out right first thing in the morning. I said, I'm on my way.
Yeah.
Put my pants on, put my shirt on, drove my happy hiney out there, and then proceeded to climb up on the ladder in the rain, in the blowing wind, and patch their roof to get them past through the night. I then took the extra step of making sure that when the next day had come across, that I ripped their entire room apart, replaced all the drywall, all the carpet, remediated anything for potential mold. Not because I had to, but because it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
You have a choice in moments like that to inspire your customer to tell others about you or inspire them to tell others about you. Steve Myrick once told me, he said, Stephen, if you make one person happy, they'll tell 5 people.
Yeah.
If you make one person angry and frustrated, they'll tell 100.
Yeah.
Beware the law of averages. So
yeah, it's true. So who was the first person that you employed, I suppose, to help the business grow? What position were they?
The first guys, they were fellow installers. I remember I was working on a job site and had to fire pretty much everybody that was working with me at the time because it just would not work.
Right.
And in the early days, I had to get things done in a specific amount of time just in order to submit a bill to get a check 2 weeks later to then pay my bills, my normal bills, as well as, try to put some money away for the business. And lo and behold, I had 3 little guys come up out of a car, and they were looking for work. And I said, I tell you what, if you guys can, we had this little contest. If you can beat me to the top of this wall, I'll hire all of you. And sure enough, they did.
Yeah, right.
Those guys are still working with me today, running large crews for me.
Oh, wow.
Installation crews. Yeah, doing a great job. But it came down to this one thing. And this, I think if you really believe this, that your team will also believe it. And that is, if you take care of me, I'll take care of you.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, give me your best day in and day out. Give me your excellence. Give me your pride. Give me your hands. Give me your craftsmanship. Give me your gratitude.
Yeah.
And I'll make sure that you never have to work anywhere else again.
So, I mean, these guys, obviously, they're still working for you. I'm guessing their role has changed significantly in the time that they came on board to where they are now. Were you
That's right.
effectively looking at a way that you could replace yourself from that management position so you could go focus on other things?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Early on, I was very much the tactical installer. I went from tactical installing to warranty tech to delivery driver to estimator to purchasing agent to accounts receivable. And all of that was in the first 3 years. So
the first week.
That's right. And that's what it takes as an entrepreneur. We all know that. But after you get some time, get some people in your place, you begin to kind of look at things strategically and figure out what's the greatest need I have.
Yeah.
Never fear hiring somebody who is better at you in a given area of your business. I find that far too many entrepreneurs, and I made this mistake myself, will hire people with lower acumen just so they can feel more important to themselves.
Okay.
So rather than doing that, what I say is never be the smartest guy in the room. Make sure that whoever's in the room with you can bring something to the table that you can't.
Yeah.
And I think I learned that the hard way, and that's why I'm so passionate about it. We spent a lot of time developing things. What I learned was that custom home exteriors, what we effectively call CHE or CHE companies, was not as much about putting on siding as it was about building people.
Yep.
I learned how to build myself there. I learned how to build those around me there, which later led me to creating the Journey Principles Institute.
Yep.
So, yeah, I've absolutely gone from this transition of working in the business to on the business to helping lead people kind of within the business, if that makes any sense.
So, look, I think I was sort of leading up to that, and you've sort of hit me at the post there a little bit. I wanted to talk about, I suppose, that transition into Journey Principles Institute.
Sure.
Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about? I mean, I suppose you effectively already have in a way, but I'd like to hear maybe the penny drop moment, if you will, on how that sort of got up and running.
In 2012, I unfortunately went through a divorce that I didn't really want. And divorces do something to you. They shake you quite a bit.
Yeah.
It's like ripping your arm off and hitting yourself with it. It's a very painful process. And I don't think anybody that's ever been through one would ever want to do it twice, for sure.
I've heard it's the arm that's holding the wallet as well.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I went through this phase where the business itself was growing. It was exploding. We were quadrupling in size year after year for about 4 years straight. The business had grossly outgrown me as a person. Mm-hmm. And I either had to catch up, or my business was going to end up imploding because of success and not failure. Mm-hmm. The second leading cause of business failure is actually success. It's growing too fast without the structure in place to kind of move forward. Mm-hmm. But that season taught me to do a lot of personal self-development, self-reflection. I felt inspired to write my first book called The Journey Principles, 10 Simple Principles for a Life Journey That Matters, which kind of was a summary, if you will, of all the life lessons, all the learning, everything that I had been shown through that new level of development or business. And everything's in there. It was very personal, very transparent and vulnerable of me. And I remember writing it, and I remember thinking to myself, if it would just help one person, it'll be worth it.
Yeah.
The book released in 2014, and it quickly was in 6 countries. We moved to about 3,000 books very quickly. And for a first-time book, for an unknown author, from a construction guy in Raleigh, North Carolina, it just didn't make sense.
Right.
And then the publishers came to me and said, Stephen, we really think that this book is so powerful that you should create some kind of curriculum. There's a lot of wisdom in here. There's a lot of understanding. There's a lot of aha moments for everybody that reads it.
Yeah.
The letters we're getting are coming in, and people seem to identify with each of the chapters. So I began kind of really trying to thinking about that and praying and meditating on that to kind of figure out, did I have something here?
Mm-hmm.
And if so, why were people drawn to it?
Mm-hmm.
What was it that was drawn? Why were they kind of coming towards it? And then I got a letter from a gentleman in prison. And I'll never do this again, but I read the letter in front of my Journey Principles team. And it moved me to tears because the very last sentence said, I don't know if anyone's ever told you, but just in case you don't know this book mattered. It saved my life and kept me from killing myself.
Wow.
I began weeping like a baby. I looked at the Journey Principles team and I said, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to put something together that will hopefully speak to people's lives, hopefully bring them to a place where they want to transition themselves past this rat wheel stuff that we kind of get stuck in.
Yeah.
Wake up, go home, wake up, go home, TV all day, all this kind of stuff. And the next thing you know, we began building Transform You Live. That live event was incredibly successful, and that led us to creating a brand new Transform You. So it's the life that I've left. I mentioned this to you earlier before. It's a lot like Forrest Gump. Each of my failures built me for something better. And I'm a firm believer that each of your failures, meaning your listeners' failures, will also build them for something greater.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. So a quick plug on that book. Is that available in all the places you would normally expect to find a book?
Yes, sir, it is. Most people will actually order directly from us because they save them a couple bucks, but you can get it from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all that kind of stuff.
And what's directly from you? Is it thejourneyprinciples.com or something?
Yep, just go to thejourneyprinciples.com. We have a little store there, and then our office can ship it directly to you and save you a couple bucks.
Digital and print?
Digital, audiobook, ebook, the whole deal. It's available in all of it. So.
Yeah, cool. All right, fantastic. So I suppose let's segue now onto a little bit about where you are today and, what your role in the business is and where you spend your time.
Because of owning two businesses, you do your best to spend it 50-50, but inevitably you go where the heat is. My construction company, I just went through a very interesting transition after almost 20 years in business when I had to fire my entire leadership team.
Oh, wow. Why?
And rehire they decided to create a competitive company.
Oh, okay.
Which is not a fun thing.
The entire leadership team did that?
Two of them specifically. The other one retired, and one was instrumental with working with the other two. Unfortunately, or fortunately, he was under a non-compete. So I think he knew better than to kind of get too far along. So
wow, okay, and so that's a bit of often cause a lot of businesses to end up in the mud. How did you pull through that one?
It's man. I just don't know. I believe in God, and I believe He had a lot to do with it. He's been with me day one since I started the companies. My life, again, you cannot read my story or be around it and not see many miracles around the way. But a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
3 months straight of no days off. Very much the same atmosphere, the same work ethic that it took to build the company from the ground up originally.
Yeah.
I was required to do it again. That effort inspires people. Your customer base, your team members.
Yeah.
When your team sees that you're working for them and not for the dollars, they tend to buy in and kind of lift up with you.
What did you learn in that experience?
I was just going to say that. What I learned was I had a lot of talent, a lot of expertise that had been suppressed by my leadership team.
Yep.
A lot of people that were very wise and capable and strong and talented were put in regular administration jobs when they actually had tremendous amounts of leadership ability.
Right.
Once that leadership change had happened, I began to witness firsthand the character and the integrity that these people had in their gut. And there's just something about the grind. There's just something about the willingness to get up off the floor, the willingness to dig another day, go at it day after day, real unrelenting so, that tends to breed success in the long term. And I think the greatest thing that I learned, one, is have non-competes. So
yeah.
Now the greatest thing I learned is the value of a team and how a team can pick you up even when you don't feel like getting up yourself.
Yeah. And so in that experience, I mean, I bang on, well, I should say, a lot about systems, processes, procedures, this kind of thing within organizations. And one of the reasons that we do that is because I don't like guys to be overly dependent on any one in particular. If you've got a system in place or a process in place, that subscribes to a specific job role or job task, et cetera, then, effectively, if something does happen and that person can't be there to fulfill that duty, then the hope is that somebody can step in and do it for them.
That's right.
Was that in place back when that leadership team fell apart?
The vast majority of it was. That's probably a good reason to part of our success.
Yep.
As far as making sure that we were able to withstand that, because the leadership team themselves effectively had not really been managing for probably close to a year.
Right.
Not effectively managing. The team had been running the business on a regular day in and out basis. The estimators were estimating, the purchasing people were purchasing, the installers were installing, the accounts payable people were doing the accounts payable and receivables.
Yep.
And the one thing that I did discover that was broken within our own processes and systems where we had specific systems that were unintegrated.
Right.
What I mean by that is our estimating software that we use would not talk to our accounting software.
Right.
And our accounting software would not talk to our project management software.
Okay.
So we're getting ready to invest about $200,000 into a brand new computer system that is all inclusive.
Okay.
That's everything. It creates real-time data.
Do you know what's it called?
The one we're looking at right now is called Builder MT.
Okay.
There are a few others called Viewpoint. There's some called Sage.
Yeah.
It seems like Builder MT has been the best solution for us because it has warranty and service modules in it,
Yep.
as well as your typical accounting, accounts payable, project management, real-time communication with your field staff and the office.
Okay. And so, that transition, I suppose, was it people within your current organization that stepped into those leadership roles, or did you have to bring people in specifically to fulfill that area of the business?
I was very fortunate in the fact that CHE has a very, very dynamic and very, very specific culture.
Yeah.
I was able to promote all but one person into a leadership role almost immediately.
Oh, wow.
That had been with the company a little while. The only person I had to replace that I had to bring in from an outside agency was my financial person, my controller CFO.
Gotcha.
The others were already in the business. So,
is your role in the business today? Are you what might be considered CEO or director, or what do you call yourself?
Chief Everything Officer, the CEO.
Okay. Yeah.
No, but my role, my real role, I believe, is to continue building the people so they can continue building the business.
Of course.
However, I deal a lot with the customers, of course. Face of the brand and the companies, both companies. Matter of fact, both the Journey Principles and CHE. I'm the face of the brand, which means nothing more than you embody the core values in which you operate your business. The face of any brand is nothing more than the embodiment of your core values.
How do you train and keep your staff motivated and on track?
I think by investing in them.
How so?
First of all, understand who they are.
Yep.
Understand what they bring to the table. Get into personality assessments. Get into values assessments. Motivators and drivers. Make sure, I made this mistake over and over again for years. I would hire somebody because I like them. Not because they actually knew what they were doing in a given area, or I would put them in the wrong place. Never put, for example, a people person, a salesperson, someone who should be in sales into accounting.
Yeah, of course.
Because they're going to want to shoot themselves and you may want to shoot them later yourself. So it's kind of one of those things. So, understanding them as people, understanding what drives them and motivates them, help them understand something called the power of goal alignment.
Yeah.
Goal alignment is nothing more than helping them understand the company's goals and visions and aspirations and helping them create a deliberate tether to their own goals and aspirations in their own life.
Beautiful. And how do you do that? That's powerful.
One of the things we do is, we work on something called the 8 pillars of life that I work on, obviously, with the company in both companies. But each year, at the beginning of the year, I challenge each of the team members to look at all 8 pillars of their life, spend time inside of that, asking themselves 4 questions.
Yep.
What's right? What's wrong? What's missing? And what's confused?
Yep.
With what's right, you want to amplify. With what's confusing, you want to clarify. What's missing, you want to find and replace. And what's wrong, a lot of times, should be in what's missing or confused, but what's wrong is what you want to focus on as far as moving past a certain hurdle.
This is beautiful. Just, you know what, though? I know we're going to do another follow-up podcast talking specifically about this. So why don't we leave this as a bit of a cliffhanger for the listeners out there? So this pillar? What's this pillar stuff? Okay, cool. Listeners, you're going to find out in the follow-up episode. Stephen's going to run through exactly that entire process because that is
right.
I'll tell you now, Stephen, I don't know if it's relative to where you guys are in the USA. However, in Australia, And, we've got quite a large community of trade business owners, in our social groups, and obviously a lot of people that listen to the podcast. One of the biggest problems across the board, regardless of specific industry, but in the construction vertical as a whole, people are having a lot of trouble retaining staff. Retaining staff. And I've done podcasts on it before, recorded podcasts before, where a lot of these guys say, you've got to have these sort of incentive plans, and you've got to be able to tie business goals to their personal goals. And I've worked in organizations that have just done a terrible job of doing that. And as a result, I've left, So I think this is going to be a really powerful follow-up podcast. So listeners, stay tuned. All right, moving along, we're getting to the end of this episode. So I suppose one thing I would like to know is, you've sort of addressed the question that I had, where what's the best thing you've ever done to find new customers? You basically said, do a great job and, referrals will come. Would that be accurate?
Yes.
Okay. How did you go down the path of avoiding competing on price?
Man, that is the difficult one. Because all things being considered, if you're in a market, whether it be brand new or established, and your service hasn't spoke loud enough to the customers, you will always end up talking about price. If your service can speak louder than the price, then you should never have to negotiate on purchase price.
Gotcha.
What I mean by that is, people were willing to pay more money for people they like, know, and trust. Trust being the biggest word. If they know that you're going to show up on time and finish on time and do a great job every single time consistently, they will pay more money for that. Now, you may only have, it may be only a few $100s but $300 on 3,000 homes a year can make a big difference on your bottom line.
Right. How do you sell that principle though to customers? Is it through case study? Is it through testimonial? Like, how do you communicate that as opposed to, well, we're a little bit more expensive?
For me, it's always been based on testimonials. You need people raving about you.
Gotcha.
You need people basically going out to the market and saying, hey, they're worth it.
Yep.
They really are worth it. We know that we're going to have consistent warranty and service support. We know we're going to have consistency on installs. We know we're going to have consistency on billing. We know that when we call, someone's going to answer the phone.
Yep.
These are the intangibles that build trust. If you can build trust with a customer, that customer was more than happy to reach out on your behalf and tell other people that you are reliable and you're worth it. When you can inspire the marketplace to remind other customers that you're worth it, you will find that your negotiations or your discussions around price don't entirely go away, but they happen less frequently because you've already earned respect and trust in the marketplace.
Yeah, beautiful. So from somebody that's built an entire business out of it, what's one or two strong referral strategies or techniques that you can recommend to listeners?
I think using the right terminology. Communicating, asking your current customer base if they would use words like consider it as a soft approach, rather than, hey dude, would you do me a favor? Would you be willing to give me a referral?
Right.
Rather than saying, and then going to them and say, would you consider, it would really help my business a lot. I really appreciate everything you've done for me. You've really opened a lot of doors. And I was curious to know if you would consider just giving me a written testimony I could throw up on the website, or would it be okay if I put you on a referral card where someone can call you every now and again, or you look at it that way, and also reward your customers.
Yeah.
For example, if you send a bid and you're awarded a bid, how about sending your customer base an edible arrangement or some kind of something they can eat with a kind cards that just says, hey, I just want to say thank you so much. You really mean a lot to us. You've blessed our business more than you know. We really look forward to a few years and years of working together. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to call. Thanks again. Enjoy the cake.
Yeah, beautiful. The little things.
The little things add up. The little things show that you genuinely care. Act like you're trying to run your business and your mother's your customer.
I say that all the time. That's amazing. If I was to ask you what's the one bit of advice you'd give to an upcoming business owner or one of the listeners out there, would that be it?
I think the one thing I would give out is, if you feel a deep calling in your heart to start a business and you know that nothing else is going to satisfy it, then don't let anything get in your way and go create it.
Yeah.
Because you will have to fight for the first several years. You will have to fight, and it's a fight.
Yeah.
You're going to have to fight because you have to create nothing. You have to create something out of nothing.
Yeah.
Do so with integrity and character. Don't go and steal people's customers. Don't go and steal in the marketplace. Don't go and get involved in deceptive practices and backhand payments and these little side deals. Let your work ethic, let your product, let your service, let your integrity stand on its own two legs, and let that propel your business forward.
Beautiful. All right, look, we're getting close to wrapping this up. A few more questions. First of all, what's the future hold for Stephen Scoggins?
Well, the future's been kind of interesting the last little bit. The future is right now we're potentially working on a TV show with some folks in LA.
Oh, wow.
About an up and coming TV show on the personal development side of my personality.
Okay.
We're also expanding into new markets with CHE. We have a new book on the horizon, and what I'm really most excited about is Transform You Online, which is just another way for people to get past a hurdle. But we can talk more about that later on.
Okay, fantastic. What's the best way for people to reach out to you, Stephen?
I think the best way is probably going to actually be to go to teamche.com or journeyprinciples.com.
Okay.
Either way, one of my incredible staff will be happy to get you in touch with myself or maybe just maybe you can enjoy some of the things that we offer.
Was it the Journey Principles or
just Journey Principles?
Oh, just Journey Principles. Okay.
Yep.
I'm just writing this down because I'll put links to this in the show notes, of course. So if anyone wants to follow up, they can do so there.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, cool. Well, look, the last question I always ask guests on the show is who they'd like to see on the show next.
I think I'd like to hear Richard Branson. I'd love to hear some of his feedback on how he created the business.
There's a caveat. You have to be able to introduce me to them.
I'll see what I can do.
That would be amazing. I'm sure that would do wonders for our ratings. I don't know.
All right.
Is there anyone though that you'd like to see on the show that's in your network?
A guy by the name of Chris Licurdo. He goes by the nickname CeeLo. He also has a podcast that you can get in touch with him on. But ChrisLicurdo.com. He's a good friend of mine. Great mentor. Has taught me a tremendous amount about perspective. And he specializes working with entrepreneurs. So he would be a great guest on your show to inspire your listeners. All
right, cool. Well, I will be asking for an email introduction to him. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, but it would be no problem at all.
Fantastic. Well, look, mate, I think that pretty much wraps up this podcast. As we said, we are going to do a follow-up episode, which is going to talk about your 8 principles or the 8 pillars of life. Yep. And by the sound of it, that is going to be an amazing podcast, super relevant to our listeners, as it basically was formed out of you building your building company. So I think that's going to be very relevant.
Stay tuned.
Yeah. Is there anything you wanted to add there, mate, before we leave this?
I want to thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit. Hopefully I was able to offer something that somebody can use today to bless their lives and get their next thing going, man.
Man, you know what? I can speak on behalf of, I imagine, all of my listeners and say this has been an amazing podcast and a great story. So I want to thank you for your time. And we look forward to hearing the follow-up podcast where we're talking about the 8 pillars.
My pleasure.
That's a wrap. Thank you for listening to another episode of Toolbox Talks. If you're liking what you hear, then you can head across to thesiteshed.com where you can join our community by signing up to our Toolbox Talks. You'll get sent a weekly notification, which is basically a highlight of everything that we've spoken about during that week, along with any other industry news that may be relevant or specific to the trades. If you're enjoying the show, you can head across to iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, where you can leave us a review. That would be fantastic, and all the reviews get read out in the show. Likewise, if you have any friends or colleagues that you think would benefit from the show and the episodes that we create, then please go ahead and share it with them.